But I first would like to thank you for giving me the floor, and also to our ambassador to Ethiopia and the African Union. It's an honor to be here with President Obasanjo, President Kufuor, and Ms. Helen Clark, and 2 and 3 intellectuals from Africa. The World Human Development Report sometimes causes in Brazil a big dismay. And this year was that. The press says, are we still the 85th place, so much effort, and we do not progress in that document? Well, this is not a joke, but it's what people say there. And in our vision, development is a never-ending story. In fact, the report says that, and Ms. Clark just said, that in so many years, Brazil, China, and India will producing more goods than many of the Western developed countries. The fact is, we are all working incessantly to give a better life to our populations. You know that soccer is very important for Brazilians. So in 1970, we won the 3rd World Championship. We used to sing that we were 70 million Brazilians in action. Today, we are almost 200 million Brazilians. Say we have a very similar demographic growth that will happen in Africa in the next 50 years. We were in the 40s, when we studied Brazilian economic history. Henry IV II went to Brazil and said, you produce very good coffee, we produce an excellent automobile. Buy our cars, we'll buy our coffee, your coffee. We didn't really heed to that counsel. We said, well, we have to industrialize. We have to transform and diversify our economies. If you look 20 years ago, Brazil was one of the more unequal countries in the world. The number of the rich people, very small number, owed more of our wealth than the much larger majority. And I think what both the former president of Nigeria and the former president of Ghana said here is that we have to be very cautious. We have to work incessantly, and we have to try to attain good governance, being it in the political side and democracy, being it in the economic side. We had a long 30 years fight against inflation. And the most important is how to balance the very important role of the state and the initiative of the citizen. That's what we are trying to do. Know that both presidents are good friends of our former president, President Lula. And President Lula was elected in a very simple platform. He said, I would like to give Brazilians, every Brazilian, 3 meals a day. It was not, I want to have a big navy or an atomic bomb, or it was to make some millions of Brazilians that went to bed without dinner. And to do that was essential to work in many different areas. Education, health. The Brazilian miracle, we are growing 10% a year. Industry was booming, but we are under a military dictatorship that gave no freedom to the citizen. And as there was no freedom, not the capacity of engaging the state, you had where there were many chemical factories, where children of poor people were being born without brains. The pollution was so high, so terrible, that the health of those citizens were being affected to the situation where children were being born without brains. So the return of democracy, it made us maybe slow down a bit in the speed of the economic development, but improved governance, improved the capacity of the citizen to create organizations, what we call civil society, organized civil society that could interact with governments in many levels. Brazil is, well, if you multiply Brazil 3.5, it's roughly the size of Africa. So we are half of the continent of South America, and we are basically Portuguese America, we're a colony for long, 300 years, that kept united. And this unity in a certain way was possible because of flexibility, political flexibility of giving a minimum of autonomy to the states and to the municipalities. I'd like also to say that if you go back to the 90s, and here I have two Brazilian congressmen of African descent. If you look at our statistics, and we have a very good Institute for National Statistics, IBGE, only 8% of Brazilians were blacks. Today, the same institute says that when Brazilians are asked to identify themselves in terms of ancestry, they say that 53% are of African descent. So this change in 20 years from 8 to 53, this is also a result of political conscientiousness. And that comes the fact that we are discussing now, and the 50th anniversary of the African Union, is that the African Renaissance is very important to us because it means that the continent, the mother of those 53% of Brazilians, have to be a source of pride. Brazilian press says sometimes that we have the complex of vira-lata. Vira-lata, I don't know if you can translate that by underdog. It's the stray dog, the one that has no owner, that lives in the street. This is changing a lot. This is changing due to the changes that Brazilian society was able to do, of increasing primary education, of increasing the number of universities, of transforming the universal health system. But we have much more to do. And our president yesterday, speaking at the Millennium Hall, mentioned the fact that the South Atlantic is not a barrier between Africa and South America, but it is a link. And that we want to work with you, the African countries, to build a better world for all of us. I used to be ambassador in Canada, and sometimes people would say, well, why in the heck Brazil is interested in the Middle East? So, well, we have 8 million people of Lebanese descent, 3 million people of African descent, Syrian descent, and maybe 200,000 Jews that are very, very influential. And we have the Middle East inside us, as we have Africa inside us. And if we look at the planet Earth as a condominium of apartments, our apartments are a very large one, and just like Canada. And we want to have a say in the council of the building. We want to have a say in the governance of the building. So, speaking of social development, speaking of political development, speaking also of this conscientiousness of keeping the building, the planet, we have to balance our policies. Half of Brazil is a forest. When I was younger, I used to be sent to Nairobi to fight NGOs, 1980, that accused us of destroying the Amazon. Today we work with NGOs. We invited the world to Rio 92. The Africans came, and we invited the world to Rio +20. Africa came. And what we want is to share our experience with the countries of Africa. Those policies that allowed Brazilians to go to bed with a late dinner, not very heavy because we are all now obesity conscientious. But at the same time, we also want to share the experience we had. We do not consider ourselves a donor country. Brazil does not give aid. We cooperate, what means we operate with our partner. But I remember when I was much younger that we received aid. USAID is here, JICA, and the Germans, and the Italians, but everybody would come with their project. So we created in the Ministry of Planning, in association with the Ministry of External Affairs, an agency that was meant to discipline aid received from abroad. It had, in a certain way, to work with our priorities. It had to, in a certain way, fit into what we thought that would be good for our development. That was a conversation. That was a negotiation. That was something that brought us good. But it has to be done through our eyes and our needs. My maternal grandmother had 14 children. My mom, 3. I have 3 boys. The older one, 35 years old, with a postdoctorate, and no grandchild. I tell him, please stop studying and producing. Be a responsible father once in a moment. The second already gave me a little girl, but this is transformation. In my early childhood, all my aunts that got widowed, they had to dress in black the whole life. There are no widows in Brazil any longer. They are beautiful, they find companions. The thing is, sometimes we want to govern society, but society has its own ways. And I think the leader, the one that gives us inspiration, the leadership that was mentioned here, also has to follow those developments in society that we do not govern. Brazil is not here to give any lesson. We work with China, we work with India and South Africa in the so-called IBAs. We work with Ghana and Nigeria. We want to learn the experiences of Africa that are good and you can bring back to our country. We want to understand Yoruba. We want to understand Ewe, because in our own country, we have communities that use those languages as liturgical languages. And we want to work with Africa because having a mother that is wealthy, that is well, gives only pride to the children. And we are a child of this continent. So that's why we really think that the whole earth has to work with you. Thank you very much.